So the power of the pivot. Now, I tell people that the pandemic has stolen my word because I was talking about pivoting long before the pivot. I am Dr. Cheryl Robinson, pivoting expert, international speaker, founder of Ready to Roar, and I'm really excited. I just pivoted part of my career and have now started my modeling career, which is new and exciting and scary all at the same time. I want to ask you a question, and you can please put your answers into the chat. How many of you feel like you have successfully pivoted in some aspect of your life? And as we go through the presentation today, I want you to think about that question, and I want you to think about all the times it feels like you had to take a detour to get to where you are today. And what does pivoting actually mean? If you could post your answers, I would appreciate it in the chat. And as you're thinking of what does pivoting actually mean, I want to share with you how I got to where I am today. Back in 2017, I had come at a crossroads with my business, and I said, is this really what you want to be doing? I had been hosting events, large events with athletes, investors. Things were going great, but I realized I had the wrong partners. I realized that the people I was surrounding myself with weren't true to who they said they were. And as I did a self-reflecting deep dive on my life, the answer was I really didn't want to be doing what I am doing. And I asked myself, well, what is it that you want to do? And my goal since I was 14 was to be a New York Times bestselling author. But in order to do that, you have to write. I had published a couple of books in the past, but that got put on the back burner due to school and to life. And when I made a commitment to focus on my writing, 3 months later, I met my former editor at Forbes Women. And when she brought me on to have a column, she asked me, what are you the expert in? That was a heavy, heavy question for me. In my past, I have 15 years of experience in sports entertainment, mainly in sports marketing and events, but I wouldn't call myself the expert. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of other people who do sports marketing. I was good at it, but I wasn't the expert at it. So I had to dig deeper. And for me, when Plan A didn't work, I picked myself up, went to Plan B, C, D, etc. And as I was looking back at that, I said, oh, that's failing forward, and no one's talking about that. And my editor said, I like it, but it has to be a little bit more positive. So I had to self-reflect again. And what does going from A to B to C to D, etc. mean? Oh, that means pivoting. And at the time, there were only a handful of people that were talking about it. And she said, this is an emerging topic. I want you to run with it. And that's where the whole embrace the pivot came from. During this time, I was also in my doctorate program. And while in the program, I said to my dissertation chair, hey, can I study pivoting? Yes, I ran with it, and I was able to ask people on a deeper level, how do they successfully pivot in their career? And through my column and through my study with my dissertation, I have all of this data. And that is what I'm going to share with you today, is how you can successfully pivot. And pivoting just means going from A to B to C to D, failing forward, leveling up, advancing, transitioning, a new beginning. And there's a whole bunch of other terms that describe pivoting. One of the biggest obstacles that people encounter is they don't realize that they are actually in a pivot. They feel that the universe or God, whatever you would like to call it, has thrown upon them all this negative experience, all this negativity, when in reality, you are literally just pivoting. And if you can adjust your mindset to one, recognize that you are just in a pivot. It's just a detour, and you will be okay. There are steps you can take to make it successful. You're going to see how much of a positive experience you're going to start to encounter, because all it takes is a little shift in the mindset. All right, let me just go back real quick. So there are three categories of pivoting. One is the mindset. Those are the deep pivots that you might be sitting with your team saying, should we buy this company? Shouldn't we buy this company? Should we sell it? And you're brainstorming. All those little brainstorms are pivots. Maybe you have to change your leadership style when you're talking to an employee. That's a pivot. That's a mindset pivot. Second one is personal. You get married, divorced, you go to school, you move, you have children, etc. And then the third main category is professional pivots. And again, today we're going to be talking about mindset and professional pivots. So the 5 types of career pivots, and sometimes someone has experienced all 5 of them in their life, or maybe you're just starting to go into a professional pivot, but one is forced. You get laid off, the company goes bankrupt, you start at a new company, a new industry, a higher position. A lot of people don't think that if they stay at one company, but start at entry level and work their way up to say VP, C-suite, that is a pivot. So when I talk to people, when I interview them for my column, they say, oh, I don't know if I actually have a pivot, but you really do, because at each one of those levels, you have to adjust your mindset. You have to adjust your leadership style, your management style, and all of those are pivots. And the biggest one, which a lot of people experienced during the pandemic, is you start your own company. And that takes a whole different skill set that you may not be used to. And the learning curve is a little bit larger, right? As I mentioned, for my dissertation, I was able to dive deeper into what it takes to successfully pivot. And there were 3 core themes with a bunch of sub-themes, but the 3 core themes came up for all the participants that I interviewed. And in no particular order, here are the steps, or here are the areas that you can work on to help you successfully pivot. So one is self-confidence. That came up time and time again, and not just with the people for my dissertation, but the women that I interview for my column and also for my podcast. It's the self-confidence to believe that you deserve better. That is the self-confidence that you can do what you set your mind to do. And the biggest sub-theme, which I found interesting that came up, was ego. How many of you feel that ego is a negative thing? If you want to put that in the chat, that would be great. What I learned from the people I've interviewed is your ego is your biggest asset. And I'm going to go a little deeper into that. Growing up, not so much from my parents, but society, teachers, they say, oh, you got to put your ego aside. But when you have an ego, and we're going to turn this positive, it is the ability and the self-confidence to share with others what you're good at, your skill set. Because if you're not telling others what you're good at, nobody knows. If you're not telling people what you're working on or what you need help with, nobody knows. There is a fine line between ego and being cocky. There 100% is. 1, it comes across in your tone, and 2, it comes across in your intentions. Let me share a very quick story. I went back to Columbia where I got my master's, and there was a whole alumni gathering, and I had just come off of the 2014 New York, New Jersey Super Bowl, where I served on various different committees for 2 years. And we were talking, and I introduced myself to someone. I said, oh, hi, I'm Cheryl. I do sports marketing. And one of my former professors literally said, stop. He put his hand right in my face and said, no, no, no. What did you just come off of? I said, the Super Bowl. He goes, what? I said, the Super Bowl. And he goes, say that with conviction. That gets people interested. And that was my journey as to, oh, ego is good, because if people don't know what you have worked on or what you're doing, they're never going to know. So if you go in genuinely with, hey, this is who I am, this is what I bring to the table, this is what I offer, you're going to be able to connect with people on other levels and then see how you can collaborate together. So keep that in mind when it comes to self-confidence. And there are ways to build your self-confidence. Start with small, manageable tasks. And every time you accomplish that, celebrate. It is good. Celebrate the small wins, because as you celebrate the small wins, you are building up your self-confidence. So when it comes to the larger task at hand, you're going to feel comfortable enough to do it. 2 is risk taking. Every single person I have interviewed takes a risk, and risk taking is different for everyone. It's subjective, but it's the ability to go after what you want. How many times do you talk yourself out of actually doing something? Oh, I'm not good enough. I don't have enough money. I don't know how to do it. But there are ways in which you can develop all those skills and just take that risk. It goes back to how you build up your self-confidence. Take small risks that aren't going to have that big of an impact on you. Build up that foundation. So when it is time to make that big decision and take that leap of faith, you are going to be prepared. That foundation has been laid for you. And the biggest thing for everyone that I have interviewed is the risk of regret. They all said that they would regret not doing it more than if they did it and it didn't turn out well. So keep that in mind as you are pivoting. And the third other big core theme is networking. It is not about quantity. It is not about how many business cards, if people still even use business cards, I know I don't anymore, that you can collect, but it is about the quality. It is about developing relationships with the long-term effect. A lot of people are scared of networking. It doesn't have to be that way. If you are more comfortable with one-on-one conversations, you are doing networking correctly. It's about knowing if they have a dog, if they went on vacation, what projects they're working on, what schools their children are going to. People get interested, and it's not about the whiffum effect, which is what's in it for me. A lot of people go into that, and I can guarantee you that is going to be short-term. From a very young age, when I first learned about networking, I've always went in with the mindset of, 1, I really want to get to know this person genuinely. 2, I don't care how long it takes, because this is the long-term game. I want this person in my life for a very long time. And 3, what can I help them with to move their projects along? Because when you are helping them, they remember that. They remember that you went out of your way to help them. And that's called a golden connector too, is when you are able to introduce others to other opportunities. So for me, I like to think of myself as that golden connector, because when I meet someone, they start telling me about their projects, I always go, oh, let me introduce you to so-and-so. And when you do that, they do remember you and they want to return the favor. Biggest thing when it comes to pivoting is the loss of identity. Because say for me, I'm just gonna use myself as an example. I had 15 years of experience in sports and entertainment. And when I decided to become a founder, start my own company, and then focus on my writing, I was still holding on to, oh, I used to work in the sports industry. I used to work with celebrities. I used to do this. But that was no longer who I was anymore. That was in the past. And a lot of people, when you first start pivoting, you hold on to who you were in the past. So you don't want to do that. And very quickly, I'm going to go through how you have to pivot your story. You have to get your story straight, because as you pivot and as you move along, people want to know who you are now, not who you were. So the first thing is, are you focusing on your past? When you share, I like to call it the quick snapshot of who I am. When you share that quick snapshot, which could also be the elevator pitch, are you focusing on your past, or are you focusing on the now and the future? And how do you want to come across? Because if you want to come across as a sharpshooter, being successful, expert, etc., you can't lead with who you were. To be blunt, no one cares who you were. They care about what you're doing now and what you're working towards. So what you want to do is start with what you're doing now. And I'm going to show you, this is my bio that right on LinkedIn. So right from the start, I am very proud that I'm a columnist at Forbes Women. I don't take that lightly, but I name drop. And some people say, oh, why do you do that? You're bragging. No, I'm not. I'm telling you why I'm valuable, what I bring to the table. And these are the people I've interviewed. And then you always want to add numbers. Numbers in business, as you all know, give you that credibility and that validity. So to have 27 editors picks from Forbes Women is a huge deal. And I want to highlight that so people know the type of writer I am. And then I always talk about my speaking. I'm very proud of that. And now I have to add the Flippa is her future to this paragraph. But that shows people who I am now and what I'm working towards, right? I'm speaking and I'm developing all these relationships. And then also going to what you're working towards is I develop leadership workshops for corporations. So in that third paragraph of my bio, boom, there it is. You know exactly what I do. But then you use your background, you loop it back to lay that foundation. You want to show that foundation of this is why or how I got to where I am. And this is where I developed my skills to help me bring value to you and to the table. And as you can see here, I talk about the business that I started, I talk about the sports industry, and I talk about that I used to be a college professor. So tying all that, having that foundation gives the validity to those first couple paragraphs, but you want to hook people right away. So if you are currently in a pivot, please, please, please know you have value. Even if you are pivoting into something that you don't have that much experience or you don't think you have that much experience, you do. You do bring some value. Talk about that first. Here's where I am, here's where I'm going, and here's how it all ties in. Here's the foundation. So I would like to ask you one last time, based on what I shared with you for career pivots and how to successfully pivot, how many of you have successfully pivoted in your life? And I would like to thank you for coming with me on this journey. You can find me here on LinkedIn and Instagram are the top ones. I do follow back. If you want to reach me, just DM me and say, hey, I saw you at Her Future, and I'm happy to connect with you. So thank you very much.